Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Okay, so I have been having a lot of issues lately with things. About 4 months ago, I had a near-death experience. I had a cardiac issue where my heart pretty much just stopped doing what it was supposed to do, and I collapsed in the middle of the grocery store. It was a seemingly random attack. It was completely unexpected, and I've always been told that I was healthy. So really, there was no reason anyone would have expected me to have any issues, but I did. I was walking with my wife around the store. We were talking about what to have for dinner, and in her words, I went pale, smiled, and literally fell face first into the pineapples. I was lucky that there actually happened to be a couple paramedics at the store when all of this happened, like beyond lucky, as I had literal minutes before I wouldn't have been able to have been revived. They were able to get me back quickly, and we all took an impromptu ride in an ambulance going to the emergency room where the doctors worked some amazing miracles on me just to keep me alive. I was in the hospital for a while. They kept me to make sure that it wasn't likely to happen again, and we went through all the consultations and tests to see why it happened. Without getting too far into it, I was basically told that I had a 90% chance of it not happening again, but that 10% was a big deal to them. So, I now have medications and have to have frequent check-ins with a cardiologist to make sure that I don't circle the drain anytime soon. And ever since I was released from the hospital though, I've noticed things are not the same for me. I've noticed that there are things that have changed slightly, and it's actually been weighing pretty heavy on my mind. I don't know if this is personal Mandela effect things, glitches, or some sort of reality or timeline shift, but here we go. The first thing that I noticed was the insurance company that my wife and I go through. The name of the company that we used is Farmers Insurance. However, that is not what I remembered it being. I very distinctly remember the company being called the Farmers Insurance Company. My wife says that the company has always just been Farmers Insurance and has never had the or company in the name. But I know this is false. At least for me it is. I have even seen the commercials in this reality where they have the jingle, and it's almost the same as the one that I remember. In this reality, it's just, "We are farmers." But I remember the jingle saying, "We are the farmers," which to me makes more sense. If you say the sentence out loud, it makes more sense to say that you are the farmer and not just farmer. But that's just my opinion. Anyways, I remember the company being the Farmers Insurance Company, and no one else does. The second thing that I remember is actually a bit more personal and not on a corporate level, and that is a local coffee shop that my wife and I like to go to. There's this little cafe that is the cutest little place and is owned by a local family, and we used to go there every weekend before the accident. I very specifically remember that the name of the cafe was the Cardinal Coffee House, and I remember that their specialty, the Cardinal, was basically a mocha with a ghost pepper syrup in it to make it spicy. I remember talking to the owner about it and asking why the store's namesake drink was that, and she said that it was because people associate heat with red, and the cardinals were red. She then also said that cardinals were spicy little birds, and basically that they were kind of mean when it came to their territory, so it just made sense to make the drink a bit spicy too. I loved her explanation, and I definitely loved the drink. the ghost pepper works so well with the chocolate. Now, none of this is apparently true. The cafe is called the Bluebird, and their special namesake drink is incredibly boring. It's basically a vanilla latte with honey in it, and it's terrible. I actually talked to the owner about it and asked her if they still had the ghost pepper syrup for the coffee. And she seemed genuinely confused on what I was talking about. I'm actually incredibly sad because it was such a fun combo and I really liked it. But it never existed according to everyone. The last thing that I think is worth mentioning actually happened at work. I work in IT, and we have a fairly tight-knit team, so I know all the guys that work on my team pretty well. Obviously, I was out for a while with my medical stuff, and I'm super thankful that they were willing to let me start back up when I was feeling better, and the company had decided to allow us to stay remote for the foreseeable future, which made working that much easier for me. However, when I finally got back into working, I noticed that one of the guys on our team was seemingly absent from the meetings. One of the network guys named Chuck was seemingly no longer part of the company. Now, these things happen all the time, and since I was gone for a while, I assumed that he had found other work and moved on. It wasn't likely that he got fired as he was good at his job and he was in great standing with the company. But then, about 3 weeks into me being back, we have a Zoom call meeting where they all requested that we put our cameras on. The meeting starts, and the head of the IT department says that he wants to introduce a new member of our team, a guy named Chuck, and that he is going to be part of the networking. I was completely confused. The guy on the camera was the guy that I remember having worked there. At first, I thought that maybe he left and then came back, and they were being cheeky about it. But everyone was being genuine, that this was Chuck's first day and that no one knew him. I even asked my direct manager after the meeting if that was the same Chuck that worked for us prior. And then he said that no one named Chuck had worked in IT before. I just said that I must have confused him with someone else, and I let it go. But I know this guy, and I know that he worked for the company before, at least in another timeline. These are just some of the things that I've noticed that have happened, and honestly, I'm pretty messed up with all of this. It's incredibly stressful remembering things that seemingly never happened or existed, and I'm struggling to cope with it. Unfortunately, I think I'm just going to have to accept things for what they are now, because I don't think that there is any way for me to go back. A couple of years ago, my husband and I decided that we wanted to go on a bit of a road trip, so we took some time off work to hit the road. The plan was to go from Colorado to South Dakota because we wanted to go see some of the landmarks and the parks up there. And his parents had actually moved up there too, so we were going to spend a couple of days with them between stops. The problem with my husband in road trips is that he is not the type to understand when he should stop, and he is 100% the type to push himself until he damn near passes out on the road. I have chastised him a dozen times about this, but he's too stubborn to listen to me. This is actually where the glitch comes into play, him being like that, and the fact that we were going on our road trip. For most of our trip to South Dakota, we had to drive north through Wyoming. It's a very direct drive up I-25 to US 85, and the trip itself isn't terribly long. However, my husband didn't want to wait until Saturday morning to make the trip. he decided that we needed to head out Friday evening after work. This meant that we would be getting out of the house at around 6 at night and staying on the road until 1 or 2 in the morning, depending on the time that we made. I was very much against this, but he was the one driving, so I didn't have much of a say in it. I don't have my license for reasons that aren't worth getting into, so I wasn't going to be able to drive for this trip. We were driving up to Black Hills and making our way through Wyoming. When it started getting dark, and I could tell that he was getting tired, I told him that we either needed to stop and get caffeine or get a hotel room or something. And after fighting a bit with him, he agreed that we could stop and get some coffee. We stopped, got our drinks, and then we headed back onto the road. I was doing fine at this point. My energy drink was working for me, but I could tell that he wasn't feeling it because I know the look on his face when he gets tired. He starts to get this really weird stonewall stare going on. And about the time that I noticed this, I look back toward the road and I see what looks like a deer run into the road, and I scream for him to watch out. And this is where things got weird. I yelled for him to watch out, and I swear that I lived through him hitting the deer, through the deer smacking into the car, and through him swerving out to the side and the car going off the road. I have a vivid memory of the crash, the sounds, the smell of the coolant and oil, and the feeling of adrenaline and terror of me sitting in the car with it upside down. I very distinctly remember looking over at his seat and seeing him unconscious and bloody. I don't know why I have these memories or why they feel so incredibly real, because it never happened. It was like all of this flashed out in my mind at the exact second that I told him to watch out. It was like all of this flashed out in my mind at the exact second that I told him to watch out. Like I lived through 2 different timelines at once. Or like I was able to experience where things split. In reality, or in this reality specifically, he swerved and slowed down and then missed the deer. But elsewhere, he hit the deer and caused a major accident. I know this may not seem as weird as most glitch in the Matrix stories, as I didn't really live through the events. But the memories of all of this happening were absolutely put into my head somehow. Like I said, I don't feel like I've lived through the situation that happened, but I remember every single second of it in agonizing detail, like it's really what happened. In the end, I don't know what to call this. Maybe I just had a weirdly active imagination all of a sudden, and the experience is one that I made up in my head. But it really doesn't feel like it. This all feels like memories of the other me, the me that went through the accident, and they somehow got downloaded into my brain.
Let me start by saying this will be long. My heart is already beating fast telling this story. Only those closest to me know that this happened. Until now. When I was 25 years old, I was driving home from work one night. I lived in Los Angeles at the time. I was driving on Sunset Boulevard, heading west towards my apartment in Brentwood. For those that are not familiar with the area, there is an expanse of sunset near UCLA that is very curvy. It is 2 lanes on either side with no shoulder. It was 8:30 on a Saturday night, so there was some traffic. I was driving along, and all of a sudden about 50 feet in front of me, I saw a car, but I was looking at the passenger door. A car had spun out of control, and it was perpendicular in my lane. I didn't have time to stop. I looked to my right and saw there was a car next to me, so I had nowhere to go. I instinctively turned my car all the way to the right anyway. Once I'd cleared the first car, I spun it all the way to the left, still trying to avoid the second car. While all this was happening, I remembered a time with my mum at Disneyland when I was 3. This is not a memory I've ever had. I vaguely remember parts of that trip, but this memory was not one of them. I realized then that my life was flashing before me, and I was going to die. I had never been so sure of anything. Every part of me knew I was about to die. I started screaming. To this day, I don't know if I vocalized anything or it was all in my head. I yelled, No, this isn't fair. I'm not done yet. All the while, swerving all over Sunset Boulevard. I suddenly stopped my car and was now perpendicular in the opposing lane of traffic. I looked around and there was not a single car anywhere. It was like everything had been wiped clean. I put my car in reverse and proceeded home. I did not see a single car the rest of my way. I was only 5 minutes away from home at that point, but Sunset Boulevard on a Saturday night was completely empty. I got to my apartment and parked on the street. I didn't see one person. While walking to my apartment, I came to the conclusion that I had died, and because I said no, I was stuck in some limbo. I had never wanted my roommate to be home so badly. Unfortunately, she wasn't. I called one of my best friends and said, I need to ask you some questions. Please just answer me and I will explain after. I asked her my name, my age, what city we lived in, and the date. Obviously, she was very alarmed. I explained that I thought I was dead, and I wasn't sure I was really on the phone with her. She tried to convince me that I was alive and that everything was okay. There was no way mathematically to escape it. There was nowhere for the car on the right to go. This moment has haunted me my whole life. There have been times when I have questioned my existence. I have wondered if my life since has been a very detailed death trip, and I'm actually lying on Sunset Boulevard, bleeding out. After many years of meditation, spiritual practice, and belief in quantum physics, I wonder what life I jumped into.
I have a really weird glitch that happened to myself and my husband about 6 months or so ago. It's not a huge story or anything like that, but it's one of those weird things that really makes you pause and think about the possibility of our reality being a simulation. So, back in December, my husband and I were invited to a small get-together at a friend's house. This was something that we used to do annually around the middle of December. But thanks to COVID, we had all decided to go ahead and just not do it until we were sure that we were all safe. And fortunately, I have a medical condition that requires me to take a specific medication that is actually an immunosuppressant. Thanks to that, I have to be super careful in public right now. And these last 2 years have been absolutely insane. I have managed, but it's definitely not easy. Anyways, this year's get-together was supposed to be a big one since we've had to cancel for a few years. By big, I don't mean a lot of people. I just mean that it was super important for everyone, and we were all looking forward to it. We all started the planning in November and decided that we would drive out on the 17th of December and stay there until the 19th, and then we would head home. On the night of the 15th, my husband and I were talking about the whole thing, and he was asking if I was certain that I was comfortable with still going to the party since it was going to be a decent number of people, around 8 or 9 including us. I said that it was fine, that I trusted my friends, and that I knew that we had all taken the proper actions to minimize the risk. Plus, It wasn't a huge gathering. Sure, 9 people was a good amount, but it wasn't something crazy. He said all right, and then we went to bed. That night, I had a really weird dream. Sure enough, it was about the party. In the dream, I remember that my husband and I were at the party, and everyone else was there, but no one was talking to each other. Like the food was prepared, everyone had plates, and everyone was sitting at a table, but there was no motion at all. Everyone there was just sitting at the table, completely still. Then, my friend Serena stood up at the end of the table and looked at me with a dead serious look and said, "Michelle, you shouldn't be here. This is a dangerous place for you." I remember those exact words being said. She said that I wasn't supposed to be there and that it was dangerous, and I remember that it was Serena specifically saying it. Now, it may sound incredibly stupid, but something about this dream caused me a huge amount of distress, and I think my husband could tell that something was wrong the next morning. He asked me if I was okay, and I told him that I had a weird dream about the party, and that, because of the dream, I was second-guessing whether or not we should go. Again, I know that sounds dumb, but then he said something that completely blew me away. He looked me straight in the face and asked me, "Did Serena tell you that we shouldn't be there?" I swear, I could feel my face go pale and I started to feel dizzy. I asked him how the hell he knew that, and he told me that he had a dream similar to that a couple of nights ago, and that was why he was so pushy about asking me if I was okay with going. The dream he described was pretty much the same as mine. People were there was food, but there was nothing going on at the party at all. It was just still, and then Serena said that we shouldn't be there. It was the freakiest thing to have someone else tell me my dream almost exactly, and I had no idea what to say. After talking it through a bit more, he said that it was pretty clear that we were both still a bit nervous, so we should sit this one out and go next year, just to be absolutely sure that we're safe. I agreed with him completely, no matter how dumb it felt to follow advice from a dumb dream. Part of me felt that the fact that we both had it was very important. We informed our friends and they're upset, but they understood. We didn't tell them about the dream, obviously, but we told them that we were going to sit this one out and came up with some bullshit reason about me not feeling well and not wanting to get everyone sick. Well, about a week after the whole party happened, I got a call from who else but Serena. I answer and say hey, and she responds sounding like absolute hell. She hardly had a voice, was coughing, and just sounded completely lethargic. She mentioned to me that she was glad that I didn't come to the party because apparently her dad had given her COVID and she didn't know she had it until about a day or so after everyone had gotten together. She mentioned that the day of the party, she had been feeling a bit weird, but it didn't seem serious. And then 2 days later, she was feeling like she was dying. At the end of it all but one of them ended up being sick with it. They all got through it, of course, but the fact that this basically became a mini super spreader event tells me that, had we gone, I would have caught it and it would not have been good. I don't know if this dream we had was some sort of weird premonition, but the fact that we both had the same dream and we both called out Serena as being the person in the dream telling me not to be there when she was the one that most likely spread it to the group, that honestly makes me think that it was something supernatural. Regardless, ever since this, I've been a pretty firm believer that things out there aren't always what they seem, and that reality is a bit weird. I have a story from when I was a kid, and I know most people will look at the story and think, ah, that's not a glitch. Or, that's nothing important that happened. Or, even that I was a kid, so I don't remember things correctly. And to that, I will say that you are wrong. What happened to me was a small and fairly innocuous thing, sure, but it was something that became a core memory because of how strange it was to me at that time, and how strange it still is to me. When I was young, around 8 or 9, my parents ended up getting divorced, and my dad really put a lot of effort into staying a part of my life. I'm not saying that he wasn't part of my life prior to this, but when they split up, he seemed to put a lot more effort into being there, which was fine. Anyways, most weekends when he would come pick me up, he would take me to a fishing supply store that we had nearby. We would go there because they had a small restaurant in the store, and they also had a massive aquarium full of all the local freshwater fish. And, being young, I absolutely thought that it was the coolest thing ever. So, while my father and I were eating our lunch, I would just sit and watch the fish swim around while my dad talked to me about school, friends, and literally anything else that was going on in my life. Now, there was one day that I remember on the way up there. My dad had told me that he had it on good knowledge that they got several new fish, including several largemouth bass that they were adding to the tank that day. Bass fish are, to me, really cool fish, so I was excited. We got there as they were adding them to the tank. So we went to go and get our food first. We got our lunch, and I recall that on this day, I was feeling strangely antsy. Back then, I probably thought that it was the excitement of the new fish and just spending the day with my dad. But there was just something off about it. I remember telling my dad that I needed to go to the restroom, and I excused myself from the table. I recall that I was walking by the tank as the employee was adding the base to the tank. But something about it was off. It took me several moments to really place it, but I can remember the whole thing vividly right now as I write this. Nothing was moving. And when I say nothing, I mean nothing. The fish were all completely motionless. The employee that was adding the fish was kneeling and holding the container of the water with the base in it, and they were pouring the water into the large tank, but the water wasn't moving. For what felt like several moments, everything in the store seemed to just completely stop moving and then sit motionless, almost like time had stopped. I stared at the fish thinking that they would swim up to see what was going on. I stared at the employee thinking that they were going to add the fish any second now. None of it happened while I was staring. It was as if the entire scene in front of me was frozen in time, and I was the only one bearing witness to this weird lockup. And I recall how much that weird feeling of anxiety hit me while I was staring at this situation. I remember feeling like, what is going on? And then immediately being struck with, what I'm seeing right now shouldn't be happening. I turned around to look at my dad, and the second I turned, I heard the sound of the water hitting the water in the tank, and life continued as normal. I looked back and things were happening as they were supposed to. Obviously, back then, I didn't know what to think of the whole thing. But looking at it now, and having looked into glitch stories and how things are probably a simulation, this almost felt like some kind of lag. Like my brain was a step ahead of the program that was running, and I wasn't supposed to notice it, but I did. It was definitely the weirdest thing that ever happened to me, and I've never had another experience like it.
So I've been sitting on this for a while, but I feel like I need to share it. It's been bugging me for years now. Maybe someone listening has experienced something similar or can offer some kind of explanation. Here goes nothing. This happened 6 years ago, when I was around 30. I was on a cross-country road trip to visit my family. I've made this trip quite a few times, usually powering through the 15-hour drive in one go. This time, I left at 3:30 p.m., a little later than I would have liked to, but I planned to get to my parents' place around 6:30 to 7 a.m. My dad's retired now and an early riser, so I knew he'd be up, and I planned to sleep until lunchtime when I got there. Everything was going smoothly until around the 6-hour mark. It was about 9:30 p.m. when I felt my eyes getting heavy. I started slipping into microsleeps, those brief moments where you literally nod off for a second with your eyes wide open, only to be startled awake suddenly. It was scary. I decided after this happened 2 or 3 times that it would be safer to find a place to stay for the night. So I aimed for the next town which I could see on the horizon. I've driven this route many times, but I've never really noticed this town before. I figured it must be one of those blink and you miss it type places. When I pulled in, the town seemed almost deserted. It was late, sure, but it felt eerie. Nearly all the businesses were closed, and I didn't see a single person around. I managed to find a motel and went inside. The staff greeted me, but they seemed kind of off, distant and not very welcoming. The room they gave me was even weirder. Some of the amenities looked more decorative than functional. There were no power sockets to charge my phone, and the TV wouldn't turn on. I couldn't even find a switch. The bed was hard and uncomfortable, like whoever designed it had never slept on a bed before. Feeling uneasy but exhausted, I decided to sleep. I figured my mind must just be overtired and I'd work it all out in the morning. During the night, I woke up a few times because of strange, unsettling sounds. Kind of like metallic groans and other noises I couldn't quite place. The creepiest thing about them was I couldn't really work out what they were or where they could be possibly coming from. I'd never heard anything like them before in my life. It was creepy, but due to my exhaustion, I eventually drifted back to sleep. In the morning, I went to check out, but the reception area was empty. It looked like it hadn't been occupied for a while. No one was around, so after waiting for a while, I just left the keys on the desk and headed out. As I drove through the town, it struck me how abandoned everything looked. There were no signs for the streets or businesses, and most places looked like they'd been empty for years. I thought I saw people out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, there was no one there. I even thought I saw a car driving in a distant street, only to find nothing when I turned to look. I eventually reached my parents' house and told them about my strange experience. They looked at me like I was crazy and said there was never any town where I described. That really freaked me out. On my way back, I set out to find the town again. I wanted to take photos to prove to them and myself that I wasn't going nuts. But when I got to the place where the town should have been, there was nothing there. Just a long abandoned building and a field on the outskirts of where I remembered the town being. I stopped at a gas station in the next town, refueled and asked the attendant about the town. They said there was no town in that area, nor had there ever been one. I don't know what happened that night. It felt real. It was real. But according to everyone else, it wasn't. Has anyone else experienced something like this? Was it a glitch in reality or something? Or did I slip into a parallel universe or something like that? I just can't shake this.
I have what I consider to be the dumbest glitch in the world, and it's also one of the most annoying things that I have ever had to deal with because it forced me to completely rearrange parts of my room. I live in the basement at my grandparents' house, and please, don't judge me for that. I'm just a 24-year-old guy that really got down on his luck during the whole pandemic. I do have a girlfriend, and we are planning on getting a place of our own. But 2020 messed up a lot of things for a lot of people, including myself. And the place that I was working actually ended up having to shut down for various reasons during COVID. I'm actually beyond grateful that my grandparents decided that they didn't mind me moving into their basement for a few years while I try to get things in order. And they are starting to look up, so that's good, but not really relevant. Anyways, I live in the basement and my room is situated as such. There's a door at the bottom of the stairs that opens inward, and right in front of that is a closet, and to the right is the wall. In the left corner by the wall where the door is, I have my bed, and my TV is on the opposite wall. I also have a nightstand that is between the foot of my bed and the wall, and that's where I typically plug in my phone charger because it's one of the only outlets that's easily accessible. There's about a 4-inch gap between the end of my nightstand and the edge of the wall, and that's where the outlet is, so I can plug it in and it's not a problem. Well, that is until a few weeks ago. My grandparents and I went out to have brunch, which is something that they like to do, and sometimes they will invite me along. It was a nice time, but while we were there, I noticed that my phone was almost dead. I must have made a face because my grandpa asked me if everything was all right, and I just said, "Oh, yeah, my phone just didn't charge overnight for some reason." He laughed and then made a joke about me forgetting to plug it in, and I said that I just must have unplugged the charger from the wall and I didn't realize it. And then we just moved on from there. When we got home, I immediately went downstairs to plug it in. I grabbed my charger, plugged off my dresser, and I went to plug it into the outlet by the nightstand. When I noticed that there was no outlet there, I was beyond confused. I was literally just standing there on my knees and staring at the wall where there used to be an outlet, and there was no outlet. I always plug my phone into this spot on the wall. I know this because it was in the perfect location for me to do it. And then I put my phone on the nightstand, and that was that. But there was no outlet at all. I started looking at the wall around where the outlet used to be, and there's now an outlet on the other side in the corner that is blocked by my nightstand. There is literally no way for me to plug my phone in there and have the nightstand where it is. The plug wouldn't even fit in the gap that's there, and if it did, it would bend the hell out of my cable. I know it's dumb, like I said, but it's the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me. This outlet literally shifted spots on my wall on a random Sunday. Because of this, I ended up completely rearranging how I had my room set up so that I could better utilize the plugs. I asked my grandparents, but they both said that they couldn't remember the outlet layout of my room, so they were no help. Either way, that was my glitch. Just a random day where an outlet decided that it wanted to hide in the corner instead of where it once was, and it forced me to move everything so that I could use it. It was incredibly annoying, but I guess it is what it is. I have a short glitch that happened to me that may not seem like it was that big of a deal, but I wasn't the only one to experience it, so it's one of those minuscule but also really crazy because it wasn't just me involved situations. My sister and I lived together for a while in a 2-bedroom apartment, and we would split the rent between the two of us. The way that we would pay the rent was that she would give me the money to put into my account. I would then deposit it and then write a direct check to the rental office, and that was that. That way, we only had to do one check, and I had checks already, so it was just the easiest way to do it. The rental office was incredibly strict about getting the rent checks early, and by that I mean that they wanted the rent to be paid on the first and no earlier. Because of this, the week that we had to pay, I would write the check and then clip it to the refrigerator, and one of us would take it up to the rental office on the first of the month. In the month in question, I had done what I usually did, and I had written out the check and I clipped it onto the fridge. Unfortunately, there was an issue at my sister's office with the payroll, and they had a delay in payment by a few days. Because of this, she wasn't going to be paid until the 3rd, so she wouldn't have been able to get me the money until then, which meant that we would be paying the rent on the 4th. The rental office had the whole due on the 1st and late on the 5th, so we were down to the wire. I know this all sounds really confusing and convoluted, but it's important to understand the timing and the process by which we do things. She got paid, she then gave me the cash, and I went to the bank to deposit it on the 3rd so we could run up the check on the 4th and be on time. I told her to remind me to grab the check in the morning so that I could take it on my way to work. Unfortunately, she didn't remind me, and I completely forgot until I was sitting at my desk at work. I was obviously cursing myself and freaking out because they weren't going to be in the office when I got off work, and if they didn't have the check in hand by the time that they locked the door to the office, they added $150 onto the rent for that month. And I was not willing to pay the extra, so I told my boss that I needed to leave at lunch for a personal thing, and he was fine with it. I kind of felt bad for dipping out early just to get a check into the office for my rent, but I figured that it was better than paying extra. Lunch came around, and I left to go get the rent check, and I was confused when I got home. The check wasn't where I had left it on the fridge. My first thought was that it had fallen, but I checked around the fridge and I couldn't seem to find it. Then, my second thought was that maybe my sister had grabbed it when she got up and then taken it in before she went into work. So, I went ahead and called up to the office and asked them if they had gotten the rent check for us, which was a bit strange to have asked, but they looked and said that they did in fact have this month's rent and that we were good. When my sister got home that evening, I thanked her for taking the rent check up to the office for me, but then she told me that she hadn't. She said that when she had gotten up that morning, the check was gone, so she assumed that I had remembered. I told her that I had forgotten to grab it and that I actually took a half day off work to get home and get it so it wouldn't be late. Neither of us took the check up to the office, but yet they had it. For the record, I genuinely believe that she was not messing with me because that's just not like her. And I wasn't running on autopilot or anything like that. Neither of us have any idea how it got to the office, but it did. Like I said at the beginning, I know it's not that big of a glitch, but it did help us out quite a bit. So I guess I want to say thank you to whoever runs the simulation.
This started about 2 years ago. I was driving home from work one evening when I felt a sudden wave of dizziness. It only lasted a moment, but when it passed, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the world seemed slightly different. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I was just tired. When I got home, I noticed a few small changes. My kitchen table had a different tablecloth, a pattern I didn't recall buying. My cat, Henry, who normally greeted me at the door, didn't come running. Instead, he was calmly sitting on the couch, giving me a look like he didn't recognize me. I told myself I was imagining things, but over the next few weeks, more little differences kept cropping up. My favorite coffee shop had a new menu item I was sure wasn't there before. My next door neighbor, whom I'd known for years, introduced himself to me like we'd never met. I began to suspect that something was seriously wrong, but I didn't want to sound crazy, so I kept it to myself. Then it happened again. I was at the grocery store when I felt that wave of dizziness, and the world seemed to shimmer around me. I steadied myself against a shelf, and when the feeling passed, I noticed everything looked slightly different once more. The layout of the store had changed. An aisle that previously had snacks on it now had cleaning supplies. Panicked, I rushed home. This time, it was more than just small changes. My car, which had a dent from a fender bender months ago, was suddenly in pristine condition. My apartment had a different couch, and some of my clothes were missing, replaced by others I didn't recognize. To top it all off, my bank account showed transactions I hadn't made. I started keeping a journal of all the changes. Every time I felt that dizziness and the world shifted, I'd note down the differences. It happened several more times over the following months. Sometimes the changes were minor, like a new brand of toothpaste in my bathroom. Other times, they were more significant, like coworkers having different roles or even different names. The worst part is, I'm no longer certain if the world I'm in now is my original one. The differences are all subtle but definite. My best friend suddenly had a sibling that they never had before. My favorite restaurant closed down, even though I distinctly remember dining there just a week ago in another version of my life. The feeling of disorientation is constant. I've tried talking to people about it, but they either don't believe me or think I'm losing my mind. I can't blame them. If someone told me this, I'd probably think the same. I've stopped trying to figure out why this is happening because it's driving me insane. Instead, I'm just trying to adapt to each new shift as best I can. But it's been exhausting, always looking for the next subtle difference, wondering if today is the day I shift again and what new changes will come with it. I really have no idea how to cope with this.
I heard a story on your channel recently about a person that found an item in a box that it couldn't have been put in. I think it was a top or something that they found in a sealed box, and it made me remember something that happened to me back when I was young. At that time, I thought that it was just a weird thing and I moved on from it. But now, I realized that this was actually a glitch in the Matrix. It actually happened whenever I was 18. I was moving out of my parents' house and then into a dormitory. Because I was 18, I was super strict on how my stuff was packed, because it was my stuff, and it was pretty much all I had to my name at that time. I kept things in their own boxes, books, CDs, clothing, everything had its place, and there was a place for everything. I know, it sounds a bit OCD, and maybe it was, but that's me. Because I had everything in its own place, I packed every single thing that I owned. Neither my mom nor my dad had packed anything in my room, and I had made sure of it. One of the boxes I packed was full of things that were on my bedside table, which was where I kept everything that I could that was important to me. One of the items in this box was a necklace that my grandmother had given to me. It was a fairly large pendant that was shaped like a sunflower. It was quite literally my prized possession from when I was young, because it was the last thing that my grandma had given to me for my birthday. I know, I'm repeating things to some extent, but this was my prized possession. Nothing I owned was more important than this necklace, and I would never do something with it that would put it somewhere that wasn't easily accessible. So, I know for a fact that I had put it in this box because it was a small box that I had sealed it with packing tape and then a strip of duct tape, and then I wrote "important" on it in all caps with a black Sharpie. However, when I got to my dorm and started unpacking, the necklace was not in the box. There was no way that it was opened, as it would have been obvious and the person would have had to have removed the duct tape from the cardboard and then cut or removed the packing tape and then removed the necklace and then retaped it all of the same tape. That's not something that is easily done, and why would you do it in the first place? To add to the weirdness, the necklace was gone for about 3 months. I was incredibly upset about the fact that it disappeared. But then one day, I got a call from my mom telling me that she found it. I was ecstatic and I asked her where she found it. She then tells me that she found it in the bathroom in the drawer on the sink where my dad kept his shaving stuff. I have no idea how or why it would have ever been put in a drawer that only my dad would have been in, and he had no idea how it got there either. He never packed anything from my room, and I remember specifically putting the necklace in the box, and the grandmother that gave it to me was his mother, so he knew how important that necklace was to me. So yeah, that's my glitch. I know it's not as weird as some, but it was super freaky to me, and I was so upset for those few months. But I'm glad that the Matrix decided to give it back to me. I have no idea how it happened or why it happened, but it did. And now, I get to tell this crazy story to people. I have a short and really strange story that happened to me and my best buddy a few years ago. It's one of those things that we can explain to some extent, and that we can tell people what happened, but we have no damn clue what actually occurred. On this night, my buddy and I were going to a local baseball game. I won't say the team because it'll give away my hometown, but it's not one that typically performs well, not that it's relevant. Anyways, we had a good time at the game, and we had quite a few drinks because we were losing, like bad. And despite this, we were not drunk. I wasn't drunk. I was definitely a bit tipsy, but I don't drink enough to actually get wasted. However, because we were drinking, we had paid for a hotel room for us to crash for the night before we went to the game. So we had somewhere to go. We got an Uber to the hotel, but before we went in, my buddy mentioned that he was desperately craving a Reese's. I laughed at him like, "Bro, why didn't we take the Uber to a gas station or something?" And he just shrugged and told me that we needed to go to get a Reese's before we went to bed. I, again, was laughing at him, but said screw it, and I pointed down the way to where there was a convenience store. We went to the store and got our Reese's, and then started back to the hotel. And that's when the glitch happened. We walked out of the convenience store, and he stopped to open his candy, and it looked like the sky went from pitch black to as bright as the middle of the day for a half a second. It was as if someone had flicked the switch to the sky on for a moment, and then immediately flicked it back off. Like it went from black to bright blue, then back to black. It was definitely the weirdest thing, but we both just kind of stood there for a moment and just stared at the sky. I'm sure that we looked like we were out of our minds just looking up. When it happened, we both completely sobered up, like 100%, completely went from a bit tipsy to completely sober. It was super weird and neither of us said anything to the other person, though we knew that we both saw it happen. We just walked back to the hotel, and didn't say a single word. The next morning, I tried to bring it up, but he was pretty much just dismissive of it, saying, "Oh, yeah, that was weird." And that was it. To the best of my knowledge, the two of us are the only ones that saw it happen, and there is no way to explain it beyond what I said earlier. It was super weird and kind of creepy, but that's about it. Nothing like it ever happened again, and I've only read a few stories that were kind of similar, but not quite the same thing. Though, if anyone has ever had an experience like this, or has a better explanation than the Matrix glitched, then I would love to hear it. I have a pretty mundane glitch that was actually kind of creepy, and something about it was seriously unsettling, but I'm not really sure what the heck it was or what it was about. What's worse, it wasn't just me that experienced it. My boyfriend also saw the whole thing play out. It actually happened just the other day, so the whole thing is still pretty fresh in my memory. I was downstairs in the laundry room, trying to fill the washing machine with a load of laundry, and when I got to the end of the current basket, I determined that there was a bit more space left in the machine. I yelled for my boyfriend to bring down another basket so I could finish filling it. He runs up and grabs one, and then rushes downstairs to get it to me. I started loading the clothing into the machine, and I get it all filled up, and as soon as I close the lid on the machine, the light in the laundry room seemed to go out. I kind of screamed as it scared me, mostly because of the timing, and my boyfriend just laughed at me, mentioning that the breaker must have tripped or something. I asked him to go check, and he then went over to where the switch was and commented that it had been flipped to the off position. That was obviously weird as we were both there by the washing machine, but it wasn't a huge deal, you know? I just thought that maybe I didn't flip it on all the way and the timing was just impeccable. But then, it got weird. My boyfriend flipped the switch back to the on position, and as soon as the light clicked on, the room was filled with the brightest flash of light that I have ever seen. It was as if someone had taken the flash from a Kodak camera and turned it up to 11. What was weirder was that it wasn't just a flash and then gone. It was a bright flash, and then it was like it was fading in slow motion, like it was dialed up, and then someone was slowly turning it back down. As the light faded, I saw what looked like silhouettes of a person walking from the door to the washing machine, and then saw them loading what looked like clothes into the washing machine, and then I saw a second silhouette walking down with another basket of clothing. It took me a few moments to realize what I was seeing, but I was basically watching what had just happened in some sort of a detail-less playback form. And after a few seconds, the whole thing played out and it was over, and the light was gone. I just stood there staring at the room and then over to my boyfriend, but the look on his face screamed what I was thinking. I asked him if he saw what I had just seen, and he just kind of nodded like, "Yep, let's not talk about it, ever." And I said okay. I checked to make sure that the washer had kicked on, and then we walked toward the door to go back upstairs. We both went up and didn't talk about the freaky event that we just both witnessed. Unfortunately, that's the whole story. We both saw this play out, but haven't really discussed it because it was weird, and neither of us have seen anything like it since. The laundry got done as normal, if anyone cares, and the basement still feels like a completely normal room. I have no idea what it was, but if anyone has any thoughts about this, please do feel free to share them. I have a bit of a strange glitch in the matrix that's also a bit boring and short, but it's one of those weird things that I cannot explain. I recently decided that I wanted to get a new car because I was able to save up a bit of cash, and I wanted to go ahead and sell my old car, which was a 2006 Nissan. It's a nice car, but it was just getting up there in years, even though I had barely driven it. It was 16 years old and it only had 100k miles on it, and that was a fairly recent achievement. As such, I put it online and I was getting hits like crazy for it. Then, I got someone that offered me $150 over what I asked if he could buy it that night. So, I went ahead and said that it was his. Then I realized that I needed to get the car cleaned out right away if the guy was going to come and buy it that night. I got it out into the driveway and I was cleaning everything out of it. I emptied out the seats and then opened the glove box and I grabbed all my CDs out of it. I then hit the eject button and I got the CD out of it and I was placing it back in its case. I will say that I hadn't listened to CDs in a while thanks to my Bluetooth earphones. But the last CD that I had apparently listened to in my car was California by Blink-182. I remember the artwork on the album and the cover because I thought that it was super neat artwork and I genuinely loved the album. So, I finished cleaning out the car, made sure that I had everything ready to go with it, and I waited for the guy to show up and check out the car. He came over with someone else, and they were looking at the car, and then he asked if he could test drive it. I told him that I didn't have any issue with that. I handed him the key, he gets in the car and then turns it on. And the second that he did, the radio kicked on, and it kicked on to a song off California by Blink-182. I kind of just glanced at the radio, and he laughed, making a comment about how it was good that the radio worked, and then he pushed the eject button, and out came the album. He handed it my way and I grabbed it, and I let him take the test drive. While he was gone, I went inside to where I put the CD case for the CD, and I opened it. And sure enough, the CD was sitting right there in the case. I was seriously confused. I mean, how the hell did I end up with 2 CDs? How did a second copy of this exact album end up in the CD player after I had taken it out and then put it away? I just put it in the case and I decided that I would think about it later. The guy then came back and said that he wanted the car, and then we finished out the deal. After all that wrapped back up, I went back inside and I was thinking about the second CD, and I was trying to remember if I may have bought the second copy of it, or if I had a friend that had maybe left it. But I just couldn't think of anything. I decided to grab the case and open it to look at the 2 CDs to see how exact of a copy it was. And to my surprise, the extra one was gone. In the case was just the 1 album and not 2. So, not only had the Matrix gifted me an extra album, but it also took it back after the fact. Like I said, I know this wasn't as weird or creepy as the other stories, but to me, it was still a really weird happening that I can't explain. Even worse, I no longer have the proof of it happened because the copy disappeared after the fact. I haven't had any other experiences since this happened, and I cannot explain how it happened, but it was seriously freaky for me. For my birthday last year, my boyfriend bought me a pair of earrings because I wanted to get my ears pierced really badly, but hadn't gotten the confidence to do so. So him buying me the earrings was enough to push me to do it because he had spent money on them and they were so cute too. The earrings in question were these little bird cages with tiny little bluebirds in them. When I say little, I mean little. The cages were about the size of my thumbnail, and the bird was obviously much, much smaller. Despite being so tiny, they were really well detailed. The little birds had colored beaks and black dotted eyes. I loved them because they were obviously beautiful, but also because I have a tattoo that is very similar on my left shoulder. I have a gold bird cage with a blue bird in it that's surrounded by music notes. I thought that it was the coolest thing that I found earrings that look similar to my tattoo. So I went and I got my ears pierced, and I made it a point to wear them as often as I can. There was one night where I decided to stay at my boyfriend's house, and before bed, I went to take a shower. Obviously, I take my earrings out when I take a shower, as I wouldn't want them to get wet or have part of them end up down the drain or something like that. I remember taking them off and then setting them on the container of cotton swabs in the back corner of the sink. Unfortunately, when I left for work that morning, I completely forgot to grab them. I was pretty upset because my boyfriend has a cat that likes to destroy things and likes to knock them around, and the shape and size of that earring is perfect for his cat to knock around the bathroom. I called my boyfriend when I got to work and I told him that I had forgotten them and asked him if he could grab them and then keep them safe until he could get them back to me. And I mentioned that I didn't want Milo, his cat, to get to them. He said that he would grab them and keep them in his car, and that he would bring them over after work that evening. I thanked him and then moved on with my day until that evening when he came over. When he came over, I then mentioned the earrings and then he pulled them from his jacket pocket, and I was legitimately confused. The earring in his hand looked very much like my earrings, but they weren't the blue birds in cages. They were little pink birds. I kind of laughed and asked if he had bought me a second pair, but he said that these were the ones that I had left over at his place. I shook my head no and kind of just stared at them awkwardly. I mentioned that the ones that he got me had blue birds and not pink ones, but he was adamant that these were the correct earrings. We actually had a small argument about them, him saying that the birds had always been pink, and me telling them that they were for sure blue. I even mentioned that they matched my tattoo, which had a blue bird on it. And strangely enough, he agreed that that would make sense, but then he kept pushing that the bird had always been pink. Obviously, I took them and I wear them pretty frequently still. But I am still at a loss for how the birds managed to change from blue and matching my tattoo to pink and not matching it. They're still cute and still my favorite ones, but I just really think that it's weird that they're different from what I remember. I even went and checked all around his bathroom the next time that I was at his place, but there were no other earrings there. So I guess that these little pink birds took the place of my blue ones, or that I shifted to a reality where he bought me pink birds and not the blue ones. I have heard and read several glitch in the matrix stories that kind of prove that both cats and dogs exist outside of the confines of the matrix. But I have a bird that seems to be able to operate outside of it as well. I have two cockatiels that have been together since they were hatched, and I came into them a few years ago. The pair are two boys, one named Froggy and the other one named Chipper. And yeah, I know they're dumb names, but it's what the previous owner had called them, and I'm not going to change them now. Chipper is a fairly calm and normal bird. He's really sweet and very friendly, but also very patient and calm while being handled. Froggy, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. He doesn't mind being held or handled, but he is energetic as hell. He likes to fly around as much as he can. He sings any chance he gets. And he also likes to nip at people for the fun of it. He's also the one of them that I personally believe is able to do things that he shouldn't be able to. What's weird is that he's done the same things twice but in the opposite way. It will make sense here in a few minutes. The first time he confused me happened about 6 months ago. I had both Froggy and Chipper out of their cage while I was home working, because they like to walk around and I have the room cleaned up enough that they won't cause any problems. I let them out of their cage during the day, but I do not let them out of the room, and they are pretty well happy with this arrangement. So, I was working in the room with them, doing what I needed to do, with Chipper sitting on my shoulder and whistling randomly, when I noticed that Froggy was nowhere to be seen. I looked around in all his hiding places, under the desk, on the top of the bookshelf, and then I turned around to look, and I noticed that he was in his cage, and he was dozing off on the perch. It confused me because there was no way that he could have gotten in the cage, because I closed it up when they're out, so they are kind of forced to stay out for a while. I kind of just accepted that maybe I had left the door open, and then he figured out how to close it, and I just didn't notice. I accepted that possibility for that event, but it was the second thing that Froggy did that confused the hell out of me. A few days after that, I had a pretty bad headache in the middle of the day, somewhere around noon, so I decided that I needed to go ahead and get them back in the cage while I took a short nap. I get them in, I lock the cage, and I shut the door to the office where their cage is, and then I go out to the couch to lie down. I fell asleep for a little while, and then I woke up to a bit of a pinching feeling on my nose. I opened my eyes, confused, and I looked down, and what do I see? Froggy, sitting on my chest and nipping at my nose, and then making his little chirp song when he notices that I'm awake. It took me a few moments to really have what was happening click. At first, I chuckled at it because I thought that it was cute that he was waking me up. But then it clicked that he shouldn't be out of the cage, nor in the living room. I get him off my chest and I sit up. Then I look over to the office. The door was shut, like completely shut and latched. I thought that maybe the door had just shut itself with the weight of the door, despite the fact that has literally never happened before. I just went in to get him back to his cage, but much to my surprise, his cage was still shut and locked, and Chipper was just sitting there staring at me like, why is he out and I'm not? The whole time that I'm trying to get Froggy back in the cage, he was just sitting on my shoulder, bouncing up and down, and singing like he was just happily celebrating his victory. I honestly have no idea how he got out of the cage, much less the room. The cage door was locked and the room door was latched, so I don't see how the little dude could have gotten out, but he did. At this point, I'm just assuming that Froggy has mastered the art of teleportation through the Matrix, and because he's a simple little guy, he just uses that power to get into and out of his cage for the fun of it. I wanted to start by saying that I love your podcast, and I am super curious about the things that people experience on a frequent basis. I have a bit of a story that happened to me, and it may not be as weird as some of the others, but I think it's worth sharing. It was about a week ago when I had this super weird thing that happened to me. and I genuinely cannot seem to be able to place it or figure it out. It was early in the morning, and I was going through my routine, going to the bathroom, taking a shower, brushing my teeth, and all of that stuff. And after I was done with my normal morning stuff, I figured that I should go ahead and take my dog for a walk. I should mention that at this point, I had not looked outside, nor had I checked my phone for the weather, and I had no idea what it was like outside. As I was walking toward the kitchen to at least get the Keurig set up, I thought out loud, I wonder what the weather's like right now. And as soon as I finished this thought, I heard what sounded like a radio voice say something like, "It is really coming down out there right now, and I don't recommend going out for too long." It seriously sounded like a radio had kicked on, like when you have an alarm clock that's set for radio. It had a bit of static and the voice saying what it said, and then it was gone. I was a bit creeped out by it because the voice was completely disembodied and I had no idea where it had come from. I checked my phone to make sure that it wasn't something on that. I don't have any of those home speaker assistant things, so it wasn't one of those. I went downstairs to my bedroom to see if I had a radio that may have kicked on in there, but there was nothing. After a few seconds, I just kind of shrugged it off, but then I thought, I wonder if that weird voice was right. I then went over to my front door and I opened it, and the second that I did, the weather seemed to change from still to downpouring. It was like I opened the door as soon as the storm was about to start. It was definitely cloudy, but it wasn't raining yet. Then I opened the door, and the rain started. I honestly felt a bit weirded out by this, and not only was this weird radio voice right about its forecast became right at the minute that I went to look outside. Obviously, I didn't take my pup for a walk, much to his disappointment. I've never heard anything like this again in my place, and I still to this day have no idea what the hell it was. I made sure several times to make sure that I didn't have any radios that may have clicked on. I've never read about this happening to anyone else, but if anyone here had ever experienced a disembodied voice tell them the forecast at the exact second that they asked the universe for it, then I would love to know more about it. I have a really strange and fairly boring or mundane glitch, but I think it's worth telling because of how weird it was, honestly. I'm 17 and I still live with my parents, but I have a part-time job and my own bank account. I also have an Amazon account, and I spend way too much of my money on random things that I need or want from Amazon, so I oftentimes get packages delivered to the front door. This information is relevant to what happened, trust me. On the day in question, I was expecting a package from Amazon with a new wireless charger for my phone because I had accidentally broken the plug on my old one. It was a weekday in March because I was in school and my parents were at work until around 5:30. I also had the night off from work, so it was going to be a good night. When I got home from school, I saw a box on the front porch and I knew that it was going to be my charger. I grabbed the box, dropped it on the counter, and I used one of the kitchen knives to cut the tape along the top to open the box up. I cut the tape, tossed the knife on the counter, and I opened it, grabbing my new charger. Then I broke the box down and I placed it by the front door so that I could toss it into the recycling later. And then I placed the charger on the counter. I planned on grabbing it and taking it upstairs, but I had forgotten it on the counter for whatever reason, and I went upstairs to my bedroom. I sat at my desk and I started doing some stuff on my computer until I started feeling a bit tired. I leaned back in my desk chair and I guess I dozed off because the next thing that I knew, I woke up to the front door of the house opening and then closing. I shook myself awake and I headed down the stairs to greet my mom. I said, "Hey." She said, "Hi." And she then told me that I got a package. I asked if I just didn't hear the delivery driver. I mentioned that I brought the package in and that it was my charger. But then she handed me the Amazon box. I grabbed it, but then looked over at the counter where the charger should have been, and it wasn't there. I then looked over to the front door where I put the box for the recycling, and it was also gone. I was incredibly confused as I knew that I had already opened the box and I had gotten my charger out when I got home. But yet, I was holding a sealed box that I assumed was containing the charger that I had ordered. I grabbed a knife and I cut it open, and sure enough, it was my charger. Now, I know this isn't too creepy, but it was really weird to me, honestly. I've thought about some of the possibilities, but none of them really make sense. One thought is that my mom could have gotten some new Amazon packing tape just to retape the box shut and then mess with me. But she couldn't have gotten the tape, and also, why would she do that, right? I also checked my Amazon app because it says the time when packages are delivered, and the time it says is that it was delivered at 4:43 p.m., which is about 45 minutes after I got home. So, there was no way that I could have brought it in when I had gotten home. So yeah, that's my glitch. I somehow managed to bring in a charger that hadn't been delivered, and I even opened it, but I forgot it on the counter when I went upstairs. It was then delivered a second time about 45 minutes later, and my mother brought the box in, still sealed. It was crazy to me, honestly, but I don't think that I'm going to ever have any explanation for it other than it was just a weird occurrence. I have two weird glitch occurrences that happened on the same road, and they happen a couple of months apart from each other. This road is one that I take to get to my sister's house, and is one that I like to think that I know pretty well since I'm on it about 3 or 4 times a month. Well, depending on how frequently I go over there. It's a pretty standard 4-lane highway that runs north and south, and it crosses a few other main highways in my county. Basically, it's one of those highways that you take to get to the bigger highways, and being 4 lanes, it's pretty clear which way you're going and where you need to be to get off the highway. So, the first one is a bit weird, but also fairly short. I was driving down the highway to get to one of the exits so that I could get on the main freeways. I was cruising at around the speed limit, which is 65, and I was pretty focused on what was going on in front of me, so it wasn't like I was distracted. A bit up the road, I see what looks like someone that had pulled over with a flat tire. I remember seeing the car, thinking, "Ooh, that's a nice car." And then thinking that it really sucked to have to pull over on the highway to change a tire. I remember thinking how much it would make me panic that someone would be speeding and not paying attention and then hit the car while I was changing it. I then also remember thinking that I should move over to the left lane so that I could give them some extra space because, that would be the polite thing to do. I glanced up at my rear view and my side view to make sure that there were no cars coming, and then I hit my signal to get over, and I looked back forward, and the car was gone. I slowly drifted over to the left lane to give space to a car 100% was not there. It wasn't like I had managed to pass the location before getting over, because I still had a few moments before I was going to get to where they were. But when I looked back, there was seriously no car there. I was upset because this now non-existent car made me look like an idiot, changing lanes just to change back like a dumbass. The second event was actually on this same stretch, but it was at the exit to get onto the other highway. This highway runs north and south, and it intersects several other highways that go east and west. Each exit for the other highways becomes what is known as a cloverleaf exit. If you don't know what a cloverleaf exit is, it's a type of exit that goes in a full circle to get you off one highway onto the other. It's called that because of the 4 exits, an east and west exit on each side of the north and south highway, and it all looks kind of like a 4-leaf clover. So, I go to get off the north and south highway to get onto the east and west highway, and I get into the clover leaf to get off one highway and then onto the other. I drive the full circle, turning to the right following the whole clover leaf, and then exit it onto the other highway, or so I thought. It took me a couple of seconds before I realized what had happened. I somehow managed to get on the cloverleaf exit, go around the circle to get onto the east-west highway, and then ended up back on the first highway going north. There was literally no way for me to have done this based on the exit that I took and where I was going. And when I say literally, I mean literally. These exits aren't roundabouts, so there's no way to end up back where you came from. But I had. I genuinely had no idea how it happened, but it did. I just sat there staring at the signs on the side of the road and looking at the next exit, which was a full exit away from where I was supposed to go. I really don't know what this was or how the hell it happened, but that was the last time the creepy stuff ever happened on the highway. And thankfully, it's been pretty normal ever since. I have 2 really weird events that happened to me, and I have no idea what to really make of them, nor if they are actually glitches in the Matrix. But I figured that I would go ahead and share them for the sake of entertainment or whatever. These both happened a few years back. There's no connection between the 2 other than I was involved, and they both kind of happened while I was at work. Well, that, and they were both weird as hell, at least to me. The first one is a bit short, but that doesn't make it any less freaky. I work as a server at a fairly large bar in a grill chain. We get a lot of people that come in over the weekend, typically starting Friday night, so it's not unusual for us to have a lot of people that are ready to keep things flowing smoothly. There was one Friday night that I worked where it seemed like we were just not going to get a lot of business, which was fine by me. Obviously, this didn't make my manager too happy as we were eating labor hours with so many people on the clock but no money coming in. He waited until around 7:30, which was typically when we would all be running around like crazy. But when business didn't pick up, he decided that a few of us needed to go home. He sent a few of the kitchen staff home and a couple of the wait staff, and basically brought us down to our weekday staff. While he was deciding who to send home, I literally said the words, "Well, as soon as they leave, we're going to get half a dozen parties in the door at the same time, and it's going to be a struggle." He laughed and then told me that since we were past the busiest hour, it wasn't likely, as that has almost literally never happened since he's worked there. But sure enough, As soon as the last person that he decided to send home walked out the back and left, we had literally 6 parties walk through the door. 6, which is half a dozen. And it wasn't just parties of 2 people. It was parties of 2, 3, 4 with kids, and so on. And they all walked in within the same 2-minute period. Needless to say, he claimed that I jinxed the store by saying what I said, and I was just more so proud that I had somehow predicted the number of parties that were going to walk in precisely. Even crazier, that was it for the entire night. We closed at 9:30, so about 2 hours later, there weren't any other parties beyond those 6 that came in. It was a really weird Friday and such a mundane event, but it was still really weird to me that it pretty much happened as I said it would. The other event was super weird too, but it kind of happened the other way around. It was the midday shift in the middle of the week, so it was pretty slow. On these shifts, I like to take my time and talk to the customers a bit more, be a little more friendly, and this is especially true if they have young kids. I love children, so I love to just chat with the little ones while I work as it makes me so much happier. A young lady and her 2 children come in, and they get seated in my section, and I come over to chat shortly while I take their order. I get their food and I bring it, and then I come back while they're eating just to do my check-in. I asked the son, who had to be around 4 or 5, if he likes his chicken tenders. And then he looked up at me with a deadpan stare and says, "Don't burn your house down." I asked him what he said, and he just smiled and said that he likes his chicken. Yeah, it was a bit weird, but I just moved on with my shift. That night, I was making dinner for my roommate and myself, and something happened with a pan that caused a bunch of oil to spill onto the burner, and it caught on fire. I panicked, I wasn't sure of what to do, and I was screaming as it started to catch on the back wall behind the stove. I admit, I didn't know what to do and I felt extremely stupid. But my roommate ran in with a small fire extinguisher we had that was rated for kitchen fires and then blasted it, putting it out. I was just standing there with a shocked look on my face when she looked over at me and said, "Geez, Liz, don't burn the house down." And as soon as she said that, I just freaked out. The fire was enough to make me stress, but the fact that she said almost the same thing as that kid, and the fact that he said that to me that day, was seriously terrifying. Well, those are my 2 events that happened to me that I can remember. It was weird to me that they both happened at my work, and maybe the first one was a complete coincidence. Or maybe my particular Chili's just happens to be in a location where the veil between reality and the matrix is thin. I mean, who knows? Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared, because your fear feeds me.